It was supposed to be a simple field trip, a yellow bus, a marked trail, and the crisp hush of Vermont's October woods. You can picture the backpacks, bright colors against the timberline, packed with sandwiches, notebooks, and the kind of hopes teenagers bring into the world without knowing they're carrying them. They signed permission slips, waved at parents through fogged bus windows, and stepped into the Green Mountains on a cool 1993 morning. They did not step back out. By nightfall, the ranger station lights blinked on against the early dark. The bus was still parked. Lunches sat half-eaten in paper bags. A stack of trail maps remained by the door, one with a thumbprint of jelly on the corner. The teachers' clipboards were on the front seat. 14 names. No footprints, no voices. Just the forest holding its breath. For 25 years, the story went quiet, until a storm broke a slope and a hiker ducked into a limestone cave that wasn't supposed to be there. He found them by accident. A collapsed nest of backpacks, notebooks swollen with damp, a strip of ribbon snagged on rock like a signal, and a page torn from a spiral. We are not alone. If this happened on your child's trip, what would you believe? An accident the forest concealed or something that watched and waited? Where are you watching from tonight? Comment your country, and subscribe if you believe some stories were never meant to stay buried. Now let's go back to the trail where the map ends. You can feel the October air before the bus even turns off the county road. Thin and bright, the kind that stings your lungs in the first breath and then settles like a promise. The Green Mountains aren't green yet at this hour. They're a hazed lavender tree line painted in cold dawn. You are there in the noise that fills the first minutes of any school trip. Sneaker squeaks, paper bags crinkling, someone rattling a can of soda they shouldn't have brought, the small fizz of a nervous laugh. If you listen closely, you'll hear the sound that isn't there, the one you'll later realize you were waiting for the whole time. The sound of goodbye. They pull in at 9:42 a.m. The bus exhales diesel and quiets. You picture Ms. Avery, the English teacher, doing one last head count with her thumb pressed over the names. She's 32, hair pinned with a tortoiseshell clip, carrying a thermos of coffee and a copy of Walden that she always swears she'll never quote from, and always does. Beside her is Coach Tom Rivera, science teacher and reluctant chaperone, a man used to controlling chaos with a whistle and a grin. He checks the weather again. A front is coming overnight. Nothing before dusk if they keep an easy pace. He tells himself he doesn't get spooked by maps. The kids descend. Lucas Klein, 14, tall for his age, laughs too loud and then looks around to see if anyone minded. Maya Patel, 13, wearing the bright blue ribbon her mother ties in her hair on test days. Ben Holler, 12, dragging a backpack that clinks softly, fossils and hope. Sisters Erin and Kayla Chen step off together in matching windbreakers. The kind of teens who share headphones but different moods. A dozen of them in all and 2 adults. 14 bodies casting cold shadows over gravel. 14 names, Ms. Avery breathes under her breath as the ranger, a compact man named Hargreaves with sunburned cheeks, lifts a gate to the trail and says, "Stay on the markers. Caves aren't on the loop." He says it like people always say it, automatic, ritualized. A rule you'll remember only when it's too late. You know the way field trips begin with that counterfeit anarchy, kids spreading out too far, then reforming at the teacher's look. The path is leaf-strewn, oaks and maples making a quiet rain of color that lands on shoulders and sticks to fleece. Someone throws a handful of leaves up and they arc like small birds. Coach Rivera tucks a pace counter into his pocket and clips his radio back on. The chatter isn't for him. It's for the ranger frequency in case. Ms. Avery counts again at the first fork, the place where, if you were going to turn left for the vista, or right for the creek, you'd decide. They go right, lower grade, easier loop. They keep laughing in that way teenagers do to make silence stay away. But the quiet has a texture here and underneath. Maybe you hear it first in the way the creek doesn't sound until you're on it, though the map says it should be close. Maybe it's the way the birds cut off mid-song, restarting from someplace deeper like someone turned the dial and then turned it back. Or maybe it's the way Maya, tying her blue ribbon tighter because the wind keeps worrying at it, glances over her shoulder at a point just past you and frowns, as if she could swear she heard her name said in the voice of someone she knew. At 10:17 they stop at a large glacial erratic, a boulder left like a thought in the wrong place. Someone carved initials there decades ago, an A inside a heart, the date weathered to a 7 and a 3 or a 2 and a 6, no one can decide. Ms. Avery pulls a plastic sleeve from her clipboard and shows the loop in brief. 2.5 out, 2.5 back, a wide stain of spruce in the middle where the path drinks itself and widens, and a ranger cabin where they'll sign the trail log on their return. She recites the ritual. Don't chase wildlife, don't eat anything you didn't bring. If you can't see me, you're too far. It's a chant as old as field trips. It will not save them. There are the small tokens you remember in any life before a line gets drawn. Ben finds a feather and tucks it into his hat. Aaron asks to stop for a photograph and Ms. Avery obliges, backing up until she bumps something that isn't a tree but the corner of a surveyor's post. She turns and sees the metal tag is blank. The stamp has worn off. Coach Rivera ties a bandana around his wrist because he always forgets a sweat towel. Lucas steps off the path to pee and calls back, "Don't look," because that's what you say to make embarrassment turn into a punchline. Kayla pulls out a disposable camera and takes a picture of the trees because the light is doing that gold-blue thing that makes everything look haunted and tender at once. But small wrongnesses keep collecting. You could make a list. The first is the markers. Blazes painted on trees every 30 yards or so. White rectangles, then nothing for a distance longer than the trail book suggests. Then 2 in a clump like someone was telling you to really pay attention, and then 1 crooked. The brushstroke slashed at an angle that suggests a hand which didn't mean to be here. The second is the radio. Twice it spits noise softly and Coach taps it like a man tapping an aquarium, half expecting fish. The third is the smell, brief and gone like old smoke where there hasn't been a fire. And the fourth is the cairn. You have to squat to see it the way they do. It sits just off the path where a tree root rises like a knuckle and collects leaves like a bowl, 5 stones intentionally stacked. The bottom one damp and black with a mineral sheen, the top flat and pale. It looks like someone signaling, except there are a dozen such little stacks along popular trails now. Instagram had taught a generation to move rocks into meaning. But in 1993, fewer hands did this for photographs. And the rocks look wrong, too clean, too recent. Whoever stacked them brushed off the dirt first. Someone's been here, Lucas says, because he wants it to be a treasure hunt. Trail markers, Coach says, and nudges the stack back into geology with the toe of his boot. Ms. Avery watches a leaf land on the array's former center like a placed thing. She thinks of calling a halt, of saying they'll turn around here and eat their sandwiches under the erratic and tell the principal they did the loop and no one will know the difference. But she sees the way Aaron holds the camera at her chest, the way Maya looks back down the path they came and then forward, as if measuring the distance of her own courage, and she knows they will go on. Adults do not always turn around when they should. They tell themselves they're not the kind of people who get lost. You hear it then. The sound you tell yourself is wind. Except it isn't wind because it's in time. 1, 2, 1, 2. A footfall or a branch knocking in a recorded rhythm. Like the forest is playing a song you recognize but can't place. Coach drops back to the tail and walks there a while. He's no fool. He's been in the woods when a cat moved parallel, 3 bodies deep. He watches the kids' footprints where the path softens to humus and counts the ones that aren't theirs. He tells himself he is not counting a 15. At the creek crossing, they rest. It's just stepping stones, flat shale quarried by gravity, surface slick with a pill skin of algae. Ben loses his footing and catches himself on the far bank with a sound like an untuned piano. Everyone laughs and then, in the peculiar courtesy of adolescence, looks away so he can reassemble his pride. Ms. Avery sits and marks their names again. She feels her heart trip in her chest and can't tell if the extra beat is caffeine or warning. The radio coughs out a burst of static and then dies like a man swallowing a word. It's probably the ridge, Coach says. It is probably not the ridge. Look, Maya says softly. Everyone stills in that ripple and freeze you only see in humans and deer. She's pointing at the opposite bank where a stand of birch peels its paper like old film. At chest height, on 3 trunks in a row, someone or something with a claw held like a pencil has stripped the bark in 3 uniform slashes. Not deep, not random. Aligned. A mark. That is when the path does what paths do in stories like this. It opens into a wrong place at exactly the right moment. A widening that isn't on the map. A basin where water once stood long enough to teach the ground its shape. A place where the sky is somehow farther away. The kids step into it without talking because there is a kind of quiet you honor without knowing why. Coach's whistle hangs against his chest in the absence of his certainty. Ms. Avery feels the way your stomach drops in the first half second. of a roller coaster and blames the fact that she didn't finish her bagel. At the center, the ground is bare of leaves as if they landed and were moved. 4 circles of pressed earth, faint as a diagram not quite touching. And in the center a thing that should be nothing but is not. An old metal lunchbox, the kind painted with superheroes. Tin knocked in at the corner, set down like an altar. You know before they open it that it will not be a child's sandwich. Lucas steps forward because he is the kind of kid who will someday put his hand into a dark space and find the thing everyone else missed. And because he believes in magic and in the possibility that magic owes you favors. Don't, Ms. Avery says the syllable out before she has decided to say it. He freezes, then looks back at her. Teenagers are always looking back to see if anyone is looking. She nods once. Gently. Inside is not a sandwich and not a snake and not a map to a geocache, because those haven't been invented yet. Inside is a folded piece of paper, the edges softened by the repetitions of hands. Lucas lifts it with 2 fingers. The pencil is faint. The loops are careful. The letters are the kind that learn themselves in middle school. We came back once. Don't follow. No date, no signature, just the shake at the end of the T and don't, like someone wrote the warning faster than they had intended once they knew what it meant. You want them to turn around here. You want Ms. Avery to assert the empire of adulthood, to say they will stash the lunchbox, mark the coordinates on the trail map and the back of her hand, and walk back in pairs. Coach looks at her and she looks at him, and there's a 4-second conversation in looks that says, "This is nonsense and it is not nonsense, and we are responsible for children, and we are ourselves children." The radio on Coach's belt makes a sound like it wants to have a sentence and then swallows it whole. That is how you decide sometimes. You wait for help to speak, and when it doesn't, you make a smaller choice instead of a big one. They decide to move on 10 minutes and then reassess. 10 minutes feels like nothing, like a breath. 10 minutes is a lifetime. The next wrongness is lag time. Do you know what it feels like when sound arrives at the wrong speed? Lucas's joke about the lunchbox lands 3 beats after he tells it. Kayla's cough seems to come from behind a tree she hasn't yet reached. Somewhere a woodpecker hammers and the echo comes from above and then beside and then not at all. The forest is throwing their noises back from places where they aren't. Count, Ms. Avery says, and they do the murmured roll, another ritual. There's the mathematics of presence if you do it out loud. The way 13 voices make the 14th one certain. It works until it doesn't. It works until they walk out of one stand of pine into something that isn't a clearing and isn't a meadow, but feels like the absence both would leave behind. The ground is open again and clean of leaves. A line of stones like a border runs from oak to oak, almost straight but not quite, like a human hand's idea of geometry. And on the far side there is a cave. Hargreaves had said there were no caves on the loop, and he is right with an accuracy that will not matter. This isn't a mapped cave. This is a mouth in the limestone. A slit at shin height where water has eaten old rock into weak vowels. You would pass it if you weren't looking. You would step in it if you weren't careful. But someone has made it visible. A strip of blue ribbon has snagged on the rock beside it, the same color as the ribbon in Maya's hair. Is that... Aaron begins, and Maya's hand goes to her head. The ribbon is still there, tied in a quick bow above her nape. She stares at the one on the rock with the flattening certainty you feel when you see a photograph of your house taken from a window you didn't know you had. She steps forward. "That's mine," she says, and hears in her own voice the way a person requests a thing and demands a truth in the same breath. Coach's whistle lifts and drops with his chest. He says, "Because this is what you say, we're turning around." He says it with his coach voice, the one that makes boys throw balls harder without knowing why. Ms. Avery nods because the universe, for a second, returns to its proper size. She thinks 10 minutes back to the creek, 20 to the erratic, 45 to the bus. We will be on the road before the front lifts over the ridge, she thinks. I will tell the principal we saw a fox. Lucas crouches by the slit to peer into the dark because he can't not. Don't, Ms. Avery says again. And he stops again because he will be a good man if he is permitted to grow into one. The sound of leaves underfoot is loud and then not. The radio on Coach's belt squeezes out a different kind of noise now. 3 clicks, a pause, 1 click, like the inverse of a metronome. He lifts it to his mouth and says, "Ranger Hargreaves, copy," and the woods answer with a version of his voice so cleanly that for a second he believes he has reached help. "Copy," it says, but the mouth that says it is not. On a human and not on a device. That is when the counting doesn't work. Ms. Avery turns to gather the kids into pairs and discovers that 14 teenagers can feel like a much smaller number when you realize you have lost count. It's not that someone is gone, it's that the space between them is bigger, as if a person might be standing in the gaps. She calls names and gets answers until she calls Ben's and nothing answers. Everyone turns in that polite, sudden way that means panic is arriving but not here yet. Ben, she calls. He is there 10 paces away, hand on the stone line. He doesn't turn because he has heard his name from the other side. The text of your life is the sum of these decisions. Step over a line. Kneel at a slit in the limestone, pick up a blue ribbon that is yours and is not yours. Answer your name though it wasn't said in the right voice. Maya reaches for the ribbon and it lifts slightly, not because of wind. Aaron takes a picture without meaning to. The shutter clacks like a small animal dying. Coach steps forward and his boot scuffs the stone line. And the sound is the sound a microphone makes when a speaker gets too close to a mouth. A feedback you feel in your teeth. Something moves at the edge of the cave. Not a thing. An absence. A darker dark where dark already is. Ms. Avery feels it the way you feel a room paying attention to you. She opens her mouth to say we are leaving now and hears herself say it from 5 feet to her left, while her own mouth is still a heartbeat from opening. She grabs Maya's wrist and pulls, and the ribbon slides off the rock like a serpent shedding skin. It comes free. It doesn't feel like fabric. And then the forest, which has been holding its breath for an hour, exhales in a single, low sound that isn't a sigh and isn't a word, and isn't a warning and is all three. The sound comes from behind them. The sound comes from in front of them. The sound comes from inside the radio at Coach's belt. The sound says, in a voice that learned to be human from listening to humans try to be quiet, "Don't follow." Ms. Avery yanks the kids toward the path. She does not look back because she is a teacher, and teachers know that looking back is permission. She counts as they move, and the numbers make no sense, and then they do, because they change while she says them. Coach runs the tail, eyes wide, knuckles white on the radio. He doesn't key again. The cave's mouth is small, and then, for a second in the corner of your eye, it is big enough to stand in. They make it 10 yards, 20, 100. The markers return, bright white rectangles on bark, and for a second the world is just paint and wood and breath. It is almost noon. The sun scrapes a blade of light through the canopy and lays it on the path like a line a child might step on to avoid lava. Erin lifts her camera for a picture because if you take a picture of a danger, you have proof it was small enough to fit in a frame. When the shutter clicks, it prints a moment that will not develop properly for 25 years inside the damp dark of a cave. It catches the exact instant that Maya's blue ribbon, the one now tied around her wrist because she refused to lose it, lifts in air though nothing moves, as if a hand you cannot see is reminding everyone who it belongs to. Erin lowers the camera. Miss Avery tells them to keep walking. Coach whispers into a radio that has no longer chosen to be a radio. Lucas says, "Did you feel that?" Though he is not sure if he means the air or the ground or his name passing him from the wrong direction. They come to a bend that will, in the archive, be labeled Point Last Seen. The map shows a gentle curve. The path shows a choice. To the right, a fall of leaves so pretty you could cry. To the left, a thread of trail that looks unofficial but is unmistakably the one feet make when they have made the wrong choice often enough. Ms. Avery hesitates for a fraction that feels like 3. Coach nods right. She points left. The decision between them is not a disagreement. It is a splitting. And somewhere just off the path, pressed between 2 stones at the root of a birch, someone has left a note written in a careful middle school hand that hasn't yet learned cursive. It is torn from a spiral and it says, in pencil dented deep enough to make the words readable after a quarter century of damp, "We are not alone." They do not see it then, but something else does. And as the first drops of the front's rain begin to prick the back of Ms. Avery's neck, a second set of footprints joins the children's in the damp duff. Set a half step behind, heel aligned to heel, like a teacher telling a class how to stand in line. And when Coach looks back to count for the first time, he sees 15. You picture the ranger station the morning after, its porch light still burning in the gray hush before sunrise, moths pinned against the glass like scraps of paper no one cleared away. The yellow bus is there, parked where it had been left. Frost etches spiderwebs along its windows. On the seat just inside the door lies Ms. Avery's clipboard, her careful notes untouched, the ink smudged where her hand had brushed them. It is an image of interruption. Life stopped mid-sentence. By 6 a.m., the parking lot is crowded. Vermont State Police cruisers nose up against the ranger's truck. Volunteers shuffle in heavy jackets, their boots crunching over gravel. Parents arrive one by one, some in slippers, some still in work uniforms, all wearing the look of people who have not yet allowed themselves to believe the unthinkable. The air is filled with the static of radios, the slap of paper maps against car hoods, the clipped cadence of orders that sound confident but aren't. You imagine the first hours. Search grids drawn with thick black markers. Coordinates rattled off and written down. Helicopters lifting into the brittle morning sky. Their blades chopping through mist. Eyes scanning the endless expanse of green treetops for the bright flash of a jacket. From above, the forest looks solid, unbroken like a sea of needles and stone. No paths, no clearings, no sign of the 14 who walked into it yesterday. On the ground, search dogs strain at their leashes, noses pressed into loam. They dart forward, then stop, confused. Trails that should lead forward vanish abruptly, as if cut with a knife. Trainers curse softly, patting fur, urging the animals to continue, but the woods give nothing back. A few paw prints are found, pressed into damp soil at a creek crossing, but they lead nowhere, ending in a tangle of leaves as though whoever left them simply lifted off the earth. The parents press close to officers, demanding answers. Mothers clutch photographs in trembling hands. Fathers pace the lot, fists stuffed into jacket pockets, faces carved with disbelief. You imagine your own child's face among the missing, what would you say? How far would you go into those woods if it were your son or daughter who never returned? By noon, reporters swarm. Cameras roll, microphones are thrust forward. The story spills out into the world. 14 missing on Vermont field trip. News anchors fumble with names, faces flash across screens. Class portraits taped to black poster boards lean against squad cars. The missing lookout in frozen smiles. Braces glinting, hair slicked with gel. Sweaters chosen by parents for picture day. Theories bloom before evidence. Some locals mutter about old mine shafts hidden in the hills. Black mouths that swallow without sound. Others whisper about the forest itself. About lights they've seen on ridgelines, about voices carried on the wind at night. A few, braver or stranger, say it was no accident. That something followed those children off the bus. The investigators cling to procedure. They expand the search radius mile by mile, marking grids with neon tape, dropping orange flags at every bend. Divers plunge into streams, their wetsuits slick with algae. Flashlights cut through dark water, illuminating only rocks and silt. Caves are checked, some so narrow the rescuers must crawl on their bellies, breath rasping against stone. Every space is empty, days blur into weeks. Meals are eaten from paper plates on hoods of cars. Cots line the ranger station floor. Parents remain hollow-eyed, refusing to leave. Ms. Avery's sister arrives from out of state, holding a jacket that still smells faintly of her. She begs officers not to give up. Coach Rivera's wife stands near the tree line, staring until her voice goes raw. She tells anyone who will listen that her husband would never abandon children, that if he is gone, something took him. By the third week, snow dusts the ridge lines. The helicopters grow fewer. Volunteers return to their jobs. News crews chase fresher stories. The case file thickens. Reports stacked in binders. Evidence bags marked with numbers but no conclusions. The search is called off. Officially, the children and their teachers are declared missing. Privately, everyone believes they are gone. The town moves on or pretends to. Desks sit empty at the middle school, their surfaces etched with names and doodles that will never be added to. Parents stop attending PTA meetings. The bus driver who dropped them off takes early retirement, unable to face the sight of yellow paint. Over time, the story fades into whispers, retold at campfires and in hushed voices, the class that vanished in '93. But then comes 2018. A storm tears through the mountains, rain pounding the limestone slopes. A hiker named Daniel Reed takes shelter in a cave newly exposed by the slide. His flashlight beam sweeps across the floor, catching fabric. At first he thinks it is trash, an old tarp left behind. But when he steps closer, he sees the shapes. Backpacks collapsed against each other in a tangle of straps and buckles, colors dulled but still visible. He crouches and unzips one. Inside, a notebook swollen with damp, pages blurred but readable. Doodles of trees, a half-written essay about to kill a mockingbird, a name scrawled in careful hand, Maya Patel. Police swarm the site within hours. Evidence bags fill with fragments of the past. Pens, cameras, paper lunch bags mummified by time. In one backpack lies a page torn from a spiral, the pencil strokes shaky but legible. We are not alone. But that isn't the only note. In another bag, beneath mold and paper fragments, investigators find something more chilling. 3 words, written in a hurried scrawl, smeared but still readable, followed from bus. You imagine holding that evidence under a fluorescent lamp, your hands trembling as the words burn into you. It means the disappearance wasn't a single moment of chance. It began before the trail, before the first step into the woods. Something or someone had already marked them, and as the officers sealed the cave with tape and marked it as a crime scene, one ranger whispered the question that everyone else was too afraid to say aloud. If they weren't alone, then who walked with them into the trees? You imagine the entrance first. A jagged mouth revealed when half the slope tore away in a storm, its limestone teeth slick with rain. The cave yawns just tall enough for a grown man to stoop and enter, wide enough for a school bus to have fit inside if the earth had swallowed one. Daniel Reed, the hiker, stumbled into it seeking shelter. He was soaked, wind slicing at his jacket, lightning cracking in the distance. When his beam of light cut across that floor, he thought it was fabric scraps, maybe from hunters or campers. But then he saw the buckles, the straps, the patches sewn onto faded nylon. And his stomach turned because he knew this wasn't trash. It was a graveyard of belonging. By the time investigators arrived, rain had slowed to mist. Flashlights slashed against stone, boots echoed in the chamber. The air smelled of rot and minerals, damp pages long since surrendered to mold. They photographed everything before touching it. One bag with a broken zipper, another with a strip of duct tape across its front, initials written in black marker, BH for Ben Holler. Inside, fossil fragments still wrapped in tissue, as if he had carried his obsession into the woods like a treasure he would never give back. In another, candy wrappers. In another, a notebook with smeared ink. And then came the papers, dozens of them scattered loose as though the packs had been rifled through. Most were ruined, but one page could still be read. The handwriting shaky, hurried. We are not alone. Investigators exchanged looks, their faces pale in the flashlight beams. They bagged the page carefully as though it might dissolve. And then deeper in the cave, beneath collapsed fabric, came the second note. This one shorter, sharper, written in a different hand, followed from Bus. You imagine what it felt like to hold that page. The pencil strokes indented so deep they scarred the paper. The words told not of accident, not of a group that wandered too far and got lost, but of something intentional, something watching, something stepping off the gravel lot at the ranger station and following them up the trail. When the discovery reached families, grief surged like it was 1993 again. Mothers collapsed on porches. Fathers clenched fists into their palms. Some families demanded silence. Don't give us hope now, not after decades of mourning. Others clung to the idea that if notes existed, maybe more did. Maybe their children had tried to leave a trail. Investigators combed the cave for days. They measured its depth, 120 feet before the chamber narrowed to a crawl space. They dusted surfaces, though moisture had stripped away fingerprints years ago. They marked every item: backpacks, pens, scraps of paper, half-rotted shoes. Among them, a disposable camera, corroded but intact. When the film was developed, only one frame survived. Grainy, dark, a cluster of shapes against the stone, blurred and indistinct. Some swore it showed the children huddled close. Others saw only shadows. But in the upper right corner, faint but undeniable, was the curve of a face half in light, half in dark, eyes too large to belong to a child. The photo was leaked within weeks. You may remember it if you were online in 2018. The Vermont cave photo, posted to forums, dissected by skeptics and believers alike. Some said it was a trick of exposure. Others claimed it was proof that whatever followed the students into the woods had found them. The FBI stepped in then. Not publicly, not with flashing jackets or cameras. Quietly, files were sealed. The cave was closed, chained, and padlocked. Reporters who asked too many questions received no answers. Families received condolences, nothing more. But in back rooms, agents studied the photo under high-resolution scanners, blew it up until every grain of film was a universe, and still could not explain the face. You imagine being one of those agents. A career built on evidence and order, suddenly confronted with something that refused both. Do you dismiss it as pareidolia, the human instinct to see faces where there are none? Or do you whisper, when the lights are off, that maybe the children weren't lost to accident but to company? Locals began whispering again. Old stories resurfaced. About the Watcher of the Green Mountains, a tale told in the 1800s by settlers who claimed something moved among the ridges, a presence that whistled back when you called names, that stacked stones in circles, that could make your voice answer you from the wrong direction. Stories that had lain dormant until 1993. Stories that now felt less like folklore and more like warnings ignored. And then, another discovery. Weeks after the cave was sealed, a man walking his dog along a fire road found a strip of fabric snagged on barbed wire. Blue faded torn, a hair ribbon. Maya Patel's mother identified it instantly. She had tied that ribbon into her daughter's hair the morning of the trip. The knot, she said through tears, was hers. But wait. This ribbon was not damp, not rotted. Its threads were frayed, but it looked as though it had been tied recently. Testing showed soil embedded in the fibers that matched not 1993, but current conditions, as if the ribbon had not sat for decades but been placed weeks earlier. Police bagged it, logged it, and went silent. Families were told nothing. The public heard nothing. But among investigators, a question gnawed. How did a ribbon from 1993 look like it had been tied in 2018? You picture the parents again, their grief reignited. Some gathered outside the ranger station with candles, holding photographs. Others refused to come, saying it was cruelty to stir ghosts. But all of them, in their private moments, must have wondered, if the ribbon was fresh, was someone keeping these children alive? Night in Barre, Vermont became a place of unease. Porch lights glowed later. Kids were called in early. The woods, once a place of hiking and hunting, became feared ground. Hikers reported strange encounters, radios spitting voices not their own, compasses spinning, the sound of footsteps always a half-beat behind, and then, as though the forest itself wanted to remind everyone of what it could do, another storm came. Trees groaned, rain battered the slopes, and when dawn rose, the ranger's porch was wet with mud, and there, placed neatly against the doorframe, was another backpack. No name tag, no note, but inside a spiral notebook with words scrawled across the first page in the same hand as before. We are still here. Whoever left it wanted it to be found. Whoever wrote it, if it was the children, if it was someone pretending, was telling the world the story wasn't finished. And when the ranger lifted his eyes to the tree line, he swore he saw a figure there. Tall, still, watching. A shadow that did not move with the wind. The question throbbed in him, in every officer, in every parent who heard the story afterward. If the children were still here, after 25 years, who was keeping them? You imagine the notebook first, spiral-bound, the kind every middle school student carried in the early 90s. Its metal coil rusted in places, its cardboard cover softened by years of damp air. The first page scrawled with words that shouldn't exist after 25 years. We are still here. Not faded, not blurred, written as if the pencil had pressed paper yesterday. The ranger who opened the backpack swore he felt the grooves under his fingers, indentations sharp as though the writer had just lifted the lead and walked away. He set it down quickly, suddenly aware of the tree line staring back at him through the station window. The backpack was logged, bagged, and sent to the state lab. Analysts examined fibers, dirt samples, insect traces. The soil embedded in the fabric was recent, not decades old. The handwriting was compared against samples from the students' old assignments, essays, worksheets, even the permission slips they had signed before the trip. The loops and strokes matched Maya Patel's hand almost perfectly. But experts argued, could it have been forged? Could someone have studied old papers and mimicked a child's script? Some pointed to tremors in the writing, subtle variations as if made by someone older or weaker. The conclusion was inconclusive, but the unease spread. If it was real, it meant Maya, or someone pretending to be Maya, was alive. The families divided again. Some clung to the hope like oxygen. Others rejected it, saying hope was worse than grief, because it reopened wounds and demanded belief in miracles. One father shouted at a town hall meeting, voice breaking, "Don't tell me my son is out there. Don't tell me he's waiting. He's gone. He's been gone for 25 years. His words silenced the room, but in the back, one mother whispered, "What if he's not?" Investigators returned to the cave with new eyes. They mapped every contour, set up motion cameras at its entrance, drilled into rock for core samples. Nights were long, the silence broken only by dripping water and the click of equipment. On the third night, one of the cameras recorded movement. Not animals, shadows, vaguely human, slipping at the edge of light. When officers replayed the footage, the shapes flickered in and out, their outlines blurred as if the lens itself recoiled. Some swore they saw children's forms, small shoulders, arms thin as reeds. Others saw figures taller than any child. Inside the chamber, near the place where backpacks had been found, another discovery surfaced. Beneath a slab of limestone loosened by drilling, a small collection of objects appeared. A Polaroid photo, a keychain shaped like a soccer ball, and a crumpled slip of lined paper. The Polaroid was blurred but showed trees, a figure in the distance, and what looked like a circle of stones. The keychain was identified as belonging to Jonah, one of the younger boys. The paper bore a single phrase written in block letters. "He walks behind us." You imagine reading that phrase by lantern light, your skin tightening, the air in the cave suddenly too close. It suggested not a single event, not an accident, but a pursuit. That the children knew they were being followed step for step by something they could not name. Word spread beyond the town. Online forums exploded with theories. Some claimed it was a hoax staged by thrill-seekers. Others said it confirmed long whispered stories about the Vermont woods, that miners had vanished in the 1800s, that hunters told of whistles echoing their own, that a thing sometimes left notes in human script, though it was not human at all. A few believers tied it to larger patterns, other disappearances across New England, families gone without a trace, all within forests where maps failed. The FBI widened its circle quietly. Agents canvassed nearby towns, asking about strangers, drifters, hermits in the woods. They reviewed gas station receipts, store ledgers, even old library sign-in sheets, hunting for anomalies. One agent confided to a local officer that the handwriting analysis unsettled her more than anything else. "If it's forged, it's by someone with access to school records. If it's real, then we've been wrong for 25 years. And then came the radio transmissions. Search teams stationed near the cave began reporting strange bursts at night. 3 clicks, a pause, 1 click. The same sequence Coach Rivera's radio had spat in 1993, recorded in his original incident file. Modern equipment shouldn't have repeated the sound, but it did, over and over, as though someone was still trying to call out across decades. One night, a team camping near the tree line reported something stranger. At 2:14 a.m., their radios picked up a voice, weak, faint, but clear enough to chill every man awake. A child's voice crackling through static saying, "Don't let him find us." The team searched the area, their floodlights sweeping trees, but found nothing but falling leaves. When they replayed the tape in the morning, the voice was still there, etched into digital memory. Experts analyzed the recording, running spectrographs and voice comparisons. The cadence matched a sample from one of the missing children, Aaron Chen, taken from a school play recorded months before the trip. The odds of coincidence were almost impossible. You picture the investigators sitting in silence after hearing it, none daring to speak. Because to admit what they heard meant admitting the children's voices still moved in the forest. That time itself hadn't ended the pursuit. Families were told nothing official, but whispers leaked. Parents who hadn't stepped into those woods in decades now drove out and stood at the trailhead, staring into the trees. Some called their children's names softly, as if expecting an answer, and sometimes late at night when the air was cold and still, they swore they heard their names whispered back. The cave was sealed again, this time with heavier chains. Officials claimed it was to preserve evidence. Locals believed it was to keep something from coming out. Rangers patrolled the area more often. Signs warned hikers to stay clear. But hikers are curious, and curiosity is dangerous. One group of college students ignored the warnings. They broke the lock one weekend and ventured inside with headlamps. Their footage, later recovered, showed laughter at first, nervous jokes bouncing against stone. But then their beams caught the far wall. Words were etched there, deep grooves in the limestone. "We stayed here." "We didn't leave." The students fled, abandoning equipment. Days later, rangers found their gear piled neatly outside the cave as if returned. Theories multiplied. Some said the children had been taken by a cult. Others pointed to the possibility of an abductor hiding them for years. But none explained the notes appearing fresh, or the voices caught on tape, or the Polaroid that seemed to show stones arranged in a circle. And that's when an officer sorting through evidence boxes late one night found something overlooked. A small envelope slipped between files, unmarked, unlogged. Inside was a strip of photo negatives. When developed, the images revealed more of the Polaroid scene. Trees, yes, but also figures, faint and pale, clustered within the stone circle. Not 14, 15. One taller than the rest, standing just behind them, its face blurred into shadow. Investigators stared at it, their skin prickling. Because if the missing children had been 15 instead of 14, who was the extra? And why had no one ever counted him before? That photo spread like wildfire among those who saw it. Copies circulated quietly. Some believed it showed the truth, that something else had walked with the group, something never named in reports. Others dismissed it as damaged film. But in every office where it was pinned to a corkboard, detectives found themselves glancing at it when the room went quiet, half expecting the blurred face to sharpen into focus when no one was looking. The cave still waits, sealed in the side of the mountain. Locals avoid it, tourists whisper about it, and parents of the missing still lay flowers at the trailhead each October. The notebooks, the photos, the voices, they all point to one truth more unsettling than absence. That the children didn't vanish alone. That something or someone was with them, step for step, page for page, word for word. And as you sit with that thought, you realize the most chilling part isn't the cave itself. It's that the story hasn't ended. Because evidence keeps surfacing as if someone or something is determined to make sure we never stop looking. Which forces the question no one dares ask out loud. If they were never truly gone, what has been keeping them all this time? You imagine the trailhead again, the one where the yellow bus parked in 1993, where children spilled out with backpacks bouncing against their shoulders and sneakers scuffing gravel. Today, the same wooden sign still stands, though weathered, its letters faded by decades of sun and rain. The ranger station nearby has been rebuilt twice, but the gravel lot feels the same, haunted by absence. Parents still drive there on anniversaries. They stand where their children once stood, staring into the tree line, listening for voices that never return. But the trail itself has changed. The woods have shifted. Branches grow where paths once wound. And when investigators retraced the route in 2019, they found something that wasn't on any map. A fork. Not the simple kind hikers mark with arrows, but a divergence that shouldn't exist. On the left, the original loop trail, still maintained, still recognizable. On the right, a narrow cut winding deeper, where moss swallows stone and trees grow so thick the sky disappears. Rangers insisted the fork was new, that storms had opened passages and erosion had carved new ways through the mountain. But locals whispered it had always been there, hidden, waiting. Searchers followed the right path for 2 miles before it ended at a clearing. Stones stood there, arranged in a circle, each one waist-high, as if placed deliberately. At the center, charred remains of what might have been a fire. No trash, no gear, nothing human but the shape of it. Photographs were taken, analyzed, filed away. Some investigators argued it was the work of teenagers in recent years, a hangout or ritual. Others looked at the Polaroid recovered from the cave, the one showing a circle of stones, and froze. Because the shapes matched too closely. It meant the children had reached this clearing in 1993. And whatever happened, it began here. You imagine stepping into that circle yourself. The air grows colder, the silence sharper. Birds don't sing above it. Even insects keep away. One detective who visited claimed his compass spun uselessly, its needle dancing with no true north. Another swore he heard whispers faint as breath, carried on a wind that never touched the leaves. They left quickly, but the photographs remained. Proof that the place existed, that the circle was more than folklore. Families demanded answers. At a community meeting, parents shouted questions at officials who offered only silence. Why was the site kept secret? Why hadn't search teams in 1993 reported it? The truth was simple, they had never reached it. Maps led elsewhere, trails looped away, and the right-hand fork seemed absent then. Or perhaps, as some whispered, it appeared only after the children walked that way, as if the forest had made a path for them, and them alone. Theories multiplied. Some spoke of cults using the circle for ceremonies. luring children with promises of safety. Others tied it to native legends of watchers in the mountains, beings who demanded offerings every generation. Skeptics dismissed both, but even skeptics couldn't explain the notes. "We are not alone." Followed from bus. "We are still here." Each one pointed to presence, not absence. And the circle, with its cold fire pit and perfectly placed stones, felt like proof of design. The FBI returned with ground-penetrating radar. They scanned beneath the clearing, sending signals into Earth. Results came back strange. Hollow spaces appeared, tunnels spidering beneath stone. Some collapsed, others open, their ends unreachable. Miners had once cut through these mountains, carving shafts in the 1800s, abandoning them after collapses. But official records showed no mine in this exact spot, which meant someone else had dug, or something else had hollowed the ground long before. When divers were lowered into one of the accessible shafts, their cameras caught images of carved walls. Not natural rock, but marks like symbols gouged into limestone with tools or claws. Experts argued for weeks. Anthropologists claimed ritual significance. Geologists claimed natural weathering. But to the families, it didn't matter. What mattered was the possibility that their children had been led underground, swallowed by tunnels the surface never revealed. And then came the sound. On the second night of radar scans, technicians left microphones planted at the clearing, sensitive enough to pick up tremors from far below. At 3 in the morning, the devices recorded a sequence: knocks, 3 quick, 1 slow. A pause, then again 3 quick, 1 slow. Analysts replayed the pattern, compared it to animal movements, to machinery, to seismic activity. Nothing matched. But one mother, listening to the tape, said it was the rhythm her daughter used when drumming her fingers on a desk. 3 quick taps, 1 pause. Again and again, the knock spread like wildfire. Reporters labeled it the echo code. Online forums lit up with speculation. Children alive in tunnels, sending signals after 25 years. Skeptics called it interference, pranksters, or echoes of mining blasts. But the families gathered at the ranger station, candles in hand, knocking on tables and doors in the same rhythm. 3 quick, 1 slow. A way of answering. A way of telling the woods, "We hear you." The FBI dismissed the recordings as inconclusive. But behind closed doors, they escalated operations. Teams entered tunnels with ropes, scanners, and weapons. Some returned pale, shaking, unable to describe what they had seen. One man quit the bureau weeks later, telling a friend only, "It wasn't empty down there." His words never made it into files. You imagine standing at the edge of one of those shafts, light barely reaching darkness. The smell of wet stone rises. The sound of water drips. You drop a pebble and wait for the splash. None comes. Only silence. And then, faintly, a reply. 3 quick knocks, 1 slow. In that moment, you understand the children may never have left the mountain at all. They may have been taken beneath it into a place where time moves differently, where voices still echo even after decades. But wait. There was one more discovery, one detail that pulled the ground from beneath investigators' certainty. In a shaft too narrow for adults, a drone was sent. Its camera streamed grainy footage of walls closing in. After 50 feet, the tunnel widened into a small chamber. On the floor lay shoes. Small, decayed, but intact. And beside them, written in charcoal against stone, a date, 2017. It was impossible. The children vanished in 1993. Yet here was a mark less than 2 years old. Investigators froze. Who had written it? Why that date? Had someone been alive down there, marking time in secret? Or was it a taunt left by whoever or whatever had followed them from the bus? The drone lost signal moments later, its feed cutting to static. When retrieved, the memory card showed only blackness after the date. Analysts restored the file again and again, but the last frame always remained the same. 2017, smudged into stone by a hand that shouldn't have been there. And as you sit with that thought, the trail grows darker, the circle colder, and the tunnels deeper in your imagination. The case isn't about where the children vanished anymore. It's about when, because the forest isn't just swallowing people. It's rewriting time itself, which leaves you with the question that investigators still can't answer. If someone wrote that date after the children vanished, then who has been living beneath the mountain all these years? You picture the descent first, ropes anchored to steel stakes, flashlights cutting pale cones into darkness, the smell of limestone sharp and wet. The FBI team goes down in single file, each footstep crunching against stone, echoing longer than it should. Radios crackle, clipped voices steady but tight. They are trained, disciplined. But no training prepares you for tunnels that shift with each breath. Walls pressing close like the mountain itself is alive. You imagine being there, light trembling in your hand, knowing that somewhere ahead children once walked and never returned. The tunnels are not natural. That much becomes clear. The walls bear marks, parallel lines etched deep, gouges too precise for erosion, too irregular for drills. Anthropologists later argue over their origin. Were they cut by settlers in the 1800s? By miners chasing silver veins? But those who touched the grooves said the stone felt warm, as though it remembered the tools that carved it. Deeper inside, the air grows colder. Radios hiss with static, sometimes carrying voices that don't belong. A team records hours of interference, analyzing it later to find fragments, syllables, half-words. One phrase repeats often enough to be undeniable. Still here. The same words written in the notebook found in 2018. The tunnels branch, dozens of them, a labyrinth beneath the mountain. Teams mark walls with spray paint arrows, but sometimes arrows vanish. Fresh stone replaces them as if the mountain repairs itself. A technician swears he painted red 3 times on the same wall, only to find it bare minutes later. His supervisor calls it fatigue, but the man resigns the next day. You imagine parents being told nothing of this. Officially, reports describe routine searches, unstable shafts, no significant findings. Privately, agents trade stories in hushed voices. Shadows crossing light when no one moves. Footsteps echoing too close behind. The sound of children laughing faintly, then vanishing. One night, a camera captures the laugh clearly. A high, thin giggle, unmistakably human. Analysts compare it to school videos from 1993. The voice matches a girl named Erin Chen. If that is true, then the tunnels hold more than silence. They hold memory, or something worse, presence. By the 3rd expedition, the team finds a chamber. Large enough for 20 people, its ceiling lost in darkness. At the center lies a circle of stones like the one on the surface, but smaller, tighter, arranged with precision. On the walls are handprints, dozens of them, pressed in charcoal and ash. Small hands, children's hands, each one smeared as if in panic. Forensics show the prints are decades old, but some are not. A few are fresher, darker, as if made within the last 5 years. Inside the circle lies an object no one can explain. A lunchbox, dented, rusted, but intact. Inside are crumbs sealed in wax paper, the remains of a sandwich. Alongside it, a note folded carefully. Written in the same shaky hand as before. We can't get out. Investigators stare at it under sterile lab light. Some insist it is real, the graphite still sharp. Others call it forgery planted to torment. But when compared to handwriting samples from 1993, it matches too closely to dismiss. The parents who see it collapse again, their grief doubled. If the children were trapped, why did no one hear them? Why did the mountain hide their voices for decades? One ranger whispers the theory others avoid. The children never left the mountain. Not in 1993. Not in 2018. That they are still here, not as they were, but as echoes, trapped in stone. And then the most chilling discovery arrives by accident. A drone sent deeper into a narrow shaft transmits shaky footage. The camera bounces, lens flickering, but the last frame freezes everyone watching. A wall covered in writing, names, each child's name carved into stone. And beneath them, new names. Names no one recognizes. Names not yet missing. The feed cuts to black. You imagine sitting in that control room staring at the frozen frame. The implication is unbearable, that the mountain not only swallowed the children but continues to write new stories, preparing for vanishings yet to come. As if it chooses, families demand to see the footage. They are denied. But rumors leak. Parents whisper about premonitions, about curses, about lists that predict who will vanish next. Children in town wake screaming, saying they heard their names whispered from the woods. Some families move away, believing distance will protect them. Others stay defiant, lighting candles each night. The tunnels are sealed once again, concrete poured into shafts. Officials declare them unsafe, dangerous. But locals know better. The mountain cannot be sealed. Paths appear where none existed. Circles form again, and always the whispers return. And then, weeks later, hikers find something new. On a ridge above the valley where no trail leads lies a single shoe. Small. Red canvas. Weathered but recent. Tests confirm it belonged to Maya Patel. Soil. Embedded in its soul dates not to 1993, but to the present year, which means someone or something carried it out of the tunnels and left it to be found. You imagine holding that shoe in your hand, the laces stiff, the canvas smelling faintly of earth. You think of Maya's mother tying that knot before the field trip, kissing her daughter's forehead, never imagining the forest would take her. And now, decades later, the shoe returns as if the forest is taunting. The shoe proves only one thing. The story is not over. The mountain is still writing, and whatever holds its pen is not finished. So the question grows sharper, cutting through silence like a blade. If the children are still here, as the notes and voices claim, then what is keeping them inside the mountain? You imagine the photograph first. A grainy still pulled from a drone that died too soon, its lens cracked by something unseen. On the screen, a wall carved with names. Some belong to children who vanished in 1993. Names you already know: Maya Patel, Ben Holler, Aaron Chen. Others belong to strangers, families who never appeared in police reports, who were never listed as missing. And below those, etched in strokes sharp and recent, names no one had vanished under yet. The implication struck like a hammer. The mountain wasn't recording loss. It was predicting it. When the photo leaked, investigators scrambled to explain. They called it pareidolia, tricks of shadow and light. But technicians who enhanced the image confirmed the carvings were deliberate. Not scratches, not erosion. Deliberate letters arranged in rows like a ledger. Families demanded access to the original wall. They were refused. Officials poured concrete into the tunnel 2 days later, claiming collapse risk. But locals whispered the truth. The FBI sealed the chamber not to protect lives but to bury prophecy. Still, whispers spread. Parents began checking the names against school rosters, against church directories, against census data, and when one mother found her nephew's name etched into stone though he was alive, panic consumed her. She pulled him from school, fled the county, and swore she'd never set foot near the Green Mountains again. The list became legend, the Stone Ledger. Online forums posted blurry enlargements, users tracing letters pixel by pixel. Some claimed to find their own surnames there. Others mocked, saying anyone could read what they wanted into rock. But the fear spread anyway, because if the stone listed futures, then who was choosing them? You imagine the agents who first stared at that wall, hardened men and women suddenly pale, suddenly small in the face of a mountain that seemed to keep its own records. One officer later admitted in a private email, it wasn't just names. Some had dates beside them, and some of those dates haven't arrived yet. Then came the first coincidence. In 2019, a teenager named Laura McInnes disappeared 2 towns over. She had never set foot on the field trip in 1993. She had no connection to the missing 14. But when locals compared her name to the ledger, it was there, spelled exactly, etched years before she was born. Officials scrambled to contain it. They claimed the name was coincidence, fabrication by grieving minds. But Laura's disappearance mirrored the others too closely. Gone during a hike, belongings left behind, footprints ending at nothing. Her parents begged for answers, none came. Only silence. The ledger became curse. Parents demanded to see if their children's names were there. Some claimed dreams of voices calling from stone. Others said the forest whispered when they walked alone, their names spoken in tones that sounded like loved ones. The panic grew so sharp that churches held vigils. Entire congregations gathered to pray against the mountain. Investigators tried to prove forgery. They argued the drone photo was doctored, but one technician leaked metadata showing the file came directly from government servers. It was real, which meant the wall was real too, buried now under concrete. But concrete cracks. In spring 2020, a landslide opened another entrance. Teenagers exploring stumbled onto the chamber again. Their phone footage was shaky, lit by weak flashlights but clear enough. The wall stood intact. And there, below the old names, new ones had appeared, carved into fresh stone. No hands carried chisels. No tools rang, yet the names multiplied. The teenagers fled. Days later, one of them vanished. His name was among the fresh carvings. You imagine being his parents, staring at grainy footage of a name on stone, then staring at the empty bed of your child. The horror isn't only grief, it's inevitability. As though the mountain didn't just witness vanishings. It demanded them. The FBI moved fast. The chamber was dynamited, its roof collapsed. Reports called it an accident, a safety measure. But locals know what explosions mean. Not safety, burial, and yet pieces of the wall survive. One fragment pulled from rubble showed part of a name. Forensic experts swore it was carved within months, not decades, which proved the carvings continued even now, as if unseen hands worked in silence. And then came the most chilling discovery. A fragment carried not a name but a sentence, rough, uneven, but legible. Don't trust him. Who wrote it? Which him did it warn of? You picture the investigators staring at that fragment under lab light, debating whether to release it. They did not. But whispers reached families anyway. Some turned suspicion inward, accusing officials of hiding truths, of collaborating with something older than the mountains themselves. Others looked outward, wondering if the field trip bus driver, the ranger, even fellow parents had played roles they never admitted. The paranoia spread. The town fractured. And always, the forest loomed silent, its tree line watching like a wall of eyes. Then, in October 2020, during the annual vigil, something unprecedented happened. Families gathered at the trailhead, candles flickering in cold wind. As prayers were spoken, 3 knocks echoed from the forest. 3 quick, 1 slow. The rhythm again. Phones recorded it. Candles trembled, mothers clutched photos tighter. The sound came not from speakers or pranksters, but from deep within the mountain, rolling like thunder. The crowd stood frozen. Then came a voice. Not clear, not steady, but enough. A child's voice, faint, pleading. Still here. The vigil collapsed into chaos. Parents screamed. Some ran toward the trees. Rangers held them back. The voice did not return. But the recording spread undeniable, raw. Analysts dissected every frequency. No radio interference, no animal call matched. Only the sound of a child speaking across time, and yet with proof came danger. Because if the voices could emerge, so could other things. Rangers began reporting shapes at night. Figures standing at the edge of light, watching silently, too still to be human. One described eyes glinting like glass. Another swore a shadow followed his patrol car for miles. By winter, patrols stopped. The forest was left to itself again. Families begged for continued searches. Officials refused. Silence replaced answers. But silence isn't safety. Because in December, another note surfaced. Found not in the woods, but inside the ranger station itself. Slipped under the locked door. On lined notebook paper, the same hand as before. We didn't leave. No footprints in snow outside. No signs of break-in, only the note. Lying like a whisper on the floor, which leaves you with the question investigators still cannot face aloud. If the children never left, then who keeps writing for them? You imagine the final winter of investigation. Snow thick across Vermont. The forest a labyrinth of white silence. The ranger station sits half-buried, its windows frosted, its roof creaking beneath ice. Inside, investigators huddle over maps and files, their voices hushed as though louder words might wake something listening in the trees. The case is no longer about children lost in 1993. It is about what still moves in the woods today. The ledger wall may be sealed, the tunnels collapsed, but evidence keeps surfacing. Another shoe, another note. A voice caught on tape. Each piece insists the same thing: the missing never left. And when the FBI tried to pull out quietly, locals rebelled. Parents chained themselves to the ranger station doors. Volunteers flooded the woods with flashlights, their beams dancing like stars in the night. Yet every search ended the same way. No footprints, no bodies, only silence. Until January 2021. That night, a storm hammered the valley. Trees snapped in the wind, power lines fell, and the mountain groaned under snow. Amid the chaos, a single transmission pierced the static. It came through ranger radios, through police scanners, even through car stereos left on overnight. A child's voice, urgent, clear. He's here. The words froze every listener. Phones lit up across town, families calling, officers shouting, but no one could trace the source. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, carried on frequencies no one controlled. Analysts replayed it for days. They confirmed it was authentic. The cadence matched recordings of Ben Holler from a 1992 school event. His voice. After 28 years, theories exploded. Some claimed the children were alive, trapped but still reaching out. Others argued something else had learned their voices, imitating them to lure more victims. But either way, the transmission proved one thing. The mountain was not silent. It was speaking. You imagine standing in your living room at midnight, the radio crackling on your shelf, and hearing a child's voice break through. He's here. Who is he? What stalks the woods even now? A week later, hikers reported finding fresh carvings on a tree near the trailhead. Letters jagged, uneven. Don't follow. The bark was wet, the edges still bleeding sap. Whoever carved it had done so hours before, but cameras at the trailhead recorded nothing. Rangers swore no one passed. Families grew desperate. Some demanded excavation of the tunnels again. Others begged the government to leave the mountain alone, to stop provoking whatever lived inside. Arguments split neighbors, churches, entire families. Because hope and fear are heavy, and both crush the spirit when carried too long. Then came the fire. In March, the abandoned ranger storage shed near the trail burned to the ground. Firefighters arrived too late. Amid the ashes, they found objects that shouldn't have been there. A student's backpack, a binder of field trip permission slips, a stack of Polaroids blurred beyond recognition. Investigators believed the fire was arson, set to destroy evidence. But locals whispered the mountain itself had rejected those objects, coughing them back into the world only to consume them. The strangest discovery was not the backpack or the slips. It was a small cassette tape melted at the edges, still partially intact. When played, the recording was faint but audible. Children's voices laughing, then crying. Then a man's voice, calm, flat. Stay together. Stay here. The tape ended abruptly and static. Officials suppressed the recording, but leaks spread. Listeners online debated whether the man was a ranger, a teacher, or someone else entirely. Some swore the voice sounded identical to the bus driver from 1993, though he had died years ago. Others said it was none of the adults from that day. It was someone no one could identify. You picture investigators replaying that tape under fluorescent lights, their hands shaking because whoever spoke those words had been with the children in the last moments, and he had given instructions no parent could bear to hear. Stay here. By summer, the case reached breaking point. Families traveled to the state capitol, demanding a full federal inquiry. They carried candles, photos, fragments of notes. Their signs read, "Bring them home." Stop the silence. Officials promised a task force, but whispers suggested the government wanted only to bury the case deeper. Still, evidence refused burial. In August, a storm uprooted trees near the original trail. Beneath one, searchers found a hollow space filled with objects, torn jackets, notebooks, and a map. The map was drawn in pencil, showing tunnels that didn't exist on geological surveys. At the edge, scrawled in faint graphite, 3 words: "Don't let go." Forensic tests dated the paper to the 1990s. The handwriting matched Aaron Chen. The discovery reignited fury. Families demanded excavation again. The FBI returned reluctantly, sending drones into smaller shafts reopened by storms. One drone captured seconds of footage before static swallowed the feed. The last frame showed movement, a figure at the end of a corridor, small, thin, standing perfectly still. Its eyes reflected light like glass before the feed cut to black. Investigators debated endlessly. Was it a child, alive after decades? Was it something else, using the form of a child to lure? No one knew. But the sight of those eyes haunted every viewer, lingering even in dreams. And then came the final signal. September 2021. Radios across the county erupted again, static dissolving into voices. Not one, but many. Children's voices layered together, chanting faintly, "We didn't leave. We didn't leave." Over and over until the sound collapsed into a single scream that cut off mid-breath. Silence followed. Phones lit up. Families wept. Officers searched again. But the mountain gave nothing back. No voices, no notes, no shoes, no maps. Only silence, as if it had spoken its last warning and now waited. You imagine standing there, the radio dead in your hands, the woods outside your window dark and watching. You imagine realizing the truth. The children never left, but neither did what took them. And if the names in stone are real, then vanishings will not stop. Which leaves the final unbearable question, one you cannot shake. If the mountain keeps writing names, then whose will appear next? You imagine the forest tonight, quiet under the Vermont sky, the trails hidden beneath tangled roots and mist. The ranger station sits empty, windows dark, doors locked. But deep in the woods, beneath stone and soil, you know the story hasn't ended. The notes, the shoes, the recordings, they weren't echoes of the past. They were signals. Signs. Reminders that the children's voices still press against the thin barrier between silence and sound. You picture the ledger wall, buried now under rubble and concrete, its name still multiplying in darkness, some already gone, others still alive, walking their lives unaware their futures are written in stone. The mountain does not care about time. It only writes. And if it wrote your name, would you even know? Tonight you lock your doors, turn off your lights, and yet part of you wonders if the next voice through static will speak your own name, because the vanishings never stopped. They simply waited. So what do you believe? Were the students of 1993 taken by something human? Someone who followed them from the bus into the woods, into the caves? Or is the mountain itself alive, writing names, keeping children in a place where time no longer matters? Tell us your theory in the comments. Some stories were never meant to stay buried. Don't let them vanish. Keep them alive with us.